Good afternoon.
Shalom.
Hope you're all doing really well. So we've got a fantastic guest in for you. We'll give it we'll give it a minute, give people a chance to log on. And what we'll do, because something I've realised, when you're sharing on Twitter, or now known as X, it doesn't actually share. It just pops up on the profile. So what I always do is go on and give it a quick share, just for people to log on.
Do I need to do the same?
You can do the same if you want.
Oh dear, I've never done this before.
It's funny. No, it's not. So, back to seriousness. What we're seeing at the moment is following on from, let's just say, from Sunday on, when it started Tommy's court case, St. George's Day, there's been a lot of conversation around the two-tier policing. Now, we have hammered the two-tier policing, and we've spoke quite a lot on that. No doubt we'll be able to get some of Brian's opinion on that as well. But we don't want to dwell on that too much. We want to look forward and talk about the reality of what is actually going on at the moment, because we see it happening in London, and we see a lot of the videos, and they all come out of London. What we don't see too much of is the videos coming out of the local towns and cities, because I can tell you now, right now in Swansea, just 20 minutes down the road, there are probably going to be hundreds of them walking through the city centre, going towards Barclays to damage it, smash the windows, spray paint it or something again, or any other establishment that they've decided it's time to boycott.
Accost locals who dare to say, why are you here?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely correct. And what the media tells you is that these people are marching through because they are concerned and they genuinely want a ceasefire. But what your eyes are telling you, if you go to these marches, it's anything but that. They are rightfully labelled hate marches from what we've seen with our own eyes in the different places. And they could lead to some real issues in the United Kingdom.
These are the very same people that on October the 7th marched and were jubilant. Let's get that straight. These are the very same people, the very same organisers, and the money is coming from, well, I think the money's coming from Saudi, but we'll find out in a little while. And why are they allowed to fund these marches? Why are they allowed to cause problems on our streets? And we'll hopefully get that from Brian.
Yes, and let's waste no more time. Let's bring on our guest. It is Brian of London. Brian, good afternoon.
Hello there.
How are you?
Hello, Wales.
Yes. Well, and that's what I failed to mention. You're coming to us live from Tel Aviv today, yes?
Yes, I am of London, but not in London. I left 15, 16 years ago.
Lucky you. Which
well,
is, considering the situation, but, it says a lot for London, doesn't it?
It does.
It does. Look, if you don't know, I don't know, people might not know. I haven't done a lot of stuff for the last few years because I kind of backed out of the whole jihad and Islam stuff for a few years. And I was big in this a long time ago. Yeah. And that was what led to me leaving the UK, essentially, because I looked around in 2007, 2008 at what future I would have with a Jewish family in London. And I didn't like what I saw coming. And I can't say I was right, but I'm not happy I was right, because I really would have liked people to have done stuff back then.
Yeah. And that's always the quite frustrating point, isn't it? Is we're very reactive. We always tend to react to things, and then we get praised then for, we reacted really well. But no, in reaction, having to be reactive is a failure. You should have been proactive and prevented it even getting to that point. And that sentiment seems to be lost on so many, politicians and normal people these days.
Yeah, and Darren Price.
Yeah.
But that's another matter. Yeah. Sorry, go on,
Brian.
Well,
the issue is that what happened was my awakening, like most people, or like older people, 9/11 was a big wake-up call. By 9/11, I was already married to an Israeli who was living with me in England. And I watched 9/11 on do you remember NTL, the cable TV company? For bizarre and complicated management consultant reasons, I was at their headquarters doing completely untelevision related accounting crap. And word goes around the office is something's happened in America. We don't have televisions or anything, but just down the hall is the control room. And the control room looks, because, and again, remember, this is 2001. This is pre-flat screen TVs. This is a room with a whole load of Sony Triton monitors. I don't know, 30, 20 by 10 or whatever. Just that wall of televisions that you only see in a control. And so we all walk down the hall, and there's a viewing gallery behind where they're all, just managing all the feeds. And that's where I watched the second building get hit. And I saw stuff that I don't think I've ever seen again. Because again, this was the analog era. Not everything was recorded. And certainly a lot of stuff was never played again. And so I studied Islam after that, because I thought I really have to understand what could do this. And that led me down a fairly dark path, but not for too long, because you study Islam, you read the Quran, the Hadith, the Sirah, all of that stuff, and you arrive at a pretty bleak conclusion that they're going to keep doing this.
Yeah.
This is what they're instructed to do. It's programmed in. It's a very rare. The rare event is that they don't do it, not that they do it.
Yeah.
And so, I wake up six and a half months ago on October the 7th at 6:31 a.m. And the reason I wake up is because I hear air raid sirens, real proper, the things you don't have in England anymore that we have. And we hadn't had them for months or even a year. So it was a bit odd. And pick up, wife, 2 kids. We all come into the room that I'm in now, because this is our safe room. And they keep ringing, and they keep ringing, and they keep ringing. And then they stopped, I don't know, about 10 minutes of alarms. And then we go into the living room, turn on the television. Israeli TV doesn't know what's going on, because they're still on loop. It's like it's a Saturday morning on a holiday. Nobody knew what was coming. They didn't have anybody. They literally had nobody in the main television stations to break in to pre-recorded stuff. So what was happening was there's a system on the television here that when there's an alarm somewhere in the country, a little thing pops up in the corner of the screen with the name of the city that's just having its, getting rocketed.
Yeah.
And so this thing on the side of the screen was just like taking the whole side of the screen, and they were talking about cooking. Anyway, that was it was very surreal. But the point I'm coming to is, having studied Islam, having read the life of Muhammad in I don't know how many different versions of it I've read the Quran in a number of I don't know Arabic, but I've read 2 or 3 translations properly. I know what they did, because it's written there. It's like there's lots of stories about Muhammad leading his tribe up for a raid to raid a neighboring desert tribe, and that's all the stuff they did.
Yeah.
And it's described in what they call holy books.
Yes, absolutely right. And there's obviously, this has been spoken about for a long time now. I know, perfect example would be Tommy Robinson, and Tommy's been banging this drum for so long, that now, obviously, what he was being persecuted for before, you can literally point to now, 15 years later, at London, and say, look, this is what was being warned about. And still, to this day, you're not allowed to question the books that you have just mentioned. And I part of the cynical side of me believes that's because there lies your answers, and they don't want people to find those answers.
Well, the religion itself tells you not to read the books, and literally prohibits non-Muslims from studying Islam too closely. And I mean, I'll just bring it to. It's frustrated me tremendously that even here in Israel, where we live next to it, Israel is vastly more complicated than the BBC or the British media would have you believe, in terms of who we are, because we're not these, go back to Poland Jews that Jill Stein in America thinks that we're all waiting to head on back to our apartments in Warsaw or wherever. That's not who we are. It isn't who we were in 1948. And today it's even further from us, because we're a mixture. I mean, tonight I'm going to a family event My brother-in-law's one parent, I think, is Polish. The other one was from Iraq. My my wife's side, it's Germany and Israel, like 8 generations at least Israel.
Yeah.
It's mixed. It's all mixed. Even this Ashkenazi Sephardi thing is breaking down at the moment. So much so that we're having an internal Jewish debate over whether you can eat rice during Passover. Believe me, that is hugely important. But it's not something. It gets to the heart that we're different from the expectation of what you think Jews are, because we're not all. And again, I'm not even white. I'm African, by the way. I was born in Africa, so.
Right.
But anyway, back to London.
Yeah.
I see what's going on there with these marches, and I personally believe that a lot of Qatari money is going into it. The money is coming from the globalists. I can say it. I'm a Jew. Like Soros, I can say it. I'm a Jew. The bad ones, and this is it's like there are bad Jews. I've had this glib line I've said for ages. There are many bad Jews and Christians despite their religion, and there are many good Muslims despite theirs. The left, it's called the left. I don't like that term. I don't like left right anymore. I think it kind of blows up. But there is definitely an anti-freedom, control everything push. I'll call it globalism. I think that's sort of what it is.
Yeah.
And that's paying. You've definitely got Qatari money in there.
Yeah.
When it comes to Iran, they kind of do that Al-Quds March, which is a very special and different thing. And I think you've covered that many years. You've gone to the Al-Quds March. I mean, that's an insane thing for the British. Britain should allow protests. I'm all for freedom of speech, but it's the different way they were policed. And I'll ramble on a little bit. How did I meet Tommy Robinson or get involved or understand EDL? When I left the UK, I sort of started leaving in 2007. It's complicated. And by 2009, I landed here. And I still had friends in the whole counter-jihad movement back in the UK. And whenever the EDL started emerging, it was around then, 2010 or 11 or something, people started to say, my friends still in the UK said, look at this EDL crowd. They're not the BNP, okay? They're not because I was a Jewish boy growing up in West London, not far from Brentford, not far from the home of Brentford Football Club, which was a massive National Front hotspot, Combat 18. I knew what the real neo-Nazis were. I knew who they were. I knew the skinheads and the bother boots, and that was I never got into fights with them because I wasn't into football, but I knew where they were and I knew where I wouldn't go looking Jewish.
Yeah. Being openly Jewish, you mean?
Openly Jewish, yeah. Got to be careful about your open Jewishness. And so when the EDL emerged, some friends said, have a look at these guys seem different. But they are football hooligans. I mean, there's no doubt about that. So I go on there. They had web forums. This is the days before Facebook, before social media existed.
Yeah.
So I get on the forums and I went on as Brian of London. I don't think I had my picture, my cartoon at that point. I was just a flag. My flag was a combination. It's the one that's actually it's like tiny in the bottom, but it's a combination of the American flag, the British flag, a bit of Australia, and then it's got Israel slapped on the top, and I think Canada. It's the Anglosphere. Maybe there's even New Zealand there, but Australia, New Zealand, what's the difference?
Yeah.
Angry comments. It's what Winston Churchill called the Anglosphere, because it was the Anglosphere that saved the world in the Second World War. It wasn't anyone else. It was the Anglosphere. France had already capitulated. Italy was, on the wrong side. The Anglosphere came to save. And I put Israel with the Anglosphere. We're not Anglospheric, but it's the Hebrew Bible that underpins the Anglosphere. They're all countries built on the Hebrew Bible, even though the Americans try not to admit it. It's the Hebrew Bible that gives them the 10 Commandments, which they've got chiseled onto their buildings, which they wish they could unchisel, but they can't. And I've rambled off now. Anyway, back to the EDL. So I go on the forums, and I'm openly Jewish, and I'm openly Israeli as well. And you know what I found, which was really weird for a far-right group? Yeah, there were some idiots, but there were other people who would bash the idiots down. Yeah. You know, they would, we're not racist, we're not anti-black, we're not anti-Jew. We're just worried about Islamic immigration.
Yeah.
And I got more and more involved in the background. I even contributed. I mean, I did some stuff that I've said subsequently, but people like, we wrote a charter, the charter of the EDL. I think it was called the Charter. Was it the Charter? Anyway, the first line was something that I put in, which was, I said, the EDL is a human rights organization arguing for the right to protest. And I got that from the NRA, from the American gun lobby, because I'd been to an event with them, and somehow I'd been sitting next to the president of the NRA at lunch, and she actually, it was a little woman, she had explained to me that this point, which was that the NRA's purpose was to defend the human right to self-defense. That was their stated aim. So they were a human rights organization. So I said to everybody, I said, the best thing we can do is call ourselves a human rights organization. And because the press will always call them far right, but then we will say, we are a human rights organization talking about the right to protest. And what happened was, and this is where we see the difference between today, this is the real crux of the two-tier policing. And that's why I absolutely think the right to protest is inviolable.
Yeah.
But what you can't do, and what they did with the EDL was, they would always position counter-protesters within missile range.
Yeah.
So they would have Antifa, and they would have the EDL, and they would put them in such a way that Antifa could throw shit at the EDL. Always. They would have horses and batons and all of this shit on standby in a side road because they wanted to deploy it. And they would always organize a kickoff. And when you've got drunk football hooligans, Tommy made it easy for them.
Yeah.
And Tommy was a different person back then. I mean, I say he was different. In his core, he has not changed a jot.
Correct.
But he's older. He's more mature. There's things of youth that, you know, everyone goes through. And the way they crush the EDL with this always putting, like, and we saw exactly the opposite of that this weekend, where you've got this giant march of people screaming for my death, walking through London. You know, they want me gone from here. I'll tell you exactly where I am. I'm in North Tel Aviv. I'm going to point in different directions. That way is the sea, 2 kilometers, 1.5. I can walk there in not too long. I point to the right. It's about 18 or 19 kilometers to the border that we fought to in 1949, the armistice line. And a bit further beyond that, there's like a place called Shiloh, for example. Shiloh is the town where when the Jews entered, it was the first place they stopped and put the tabernacle down. Okay, it's the first resting place of the original tabernacle with the tablet, so that Raiders of the Lost Ark found in Egypt. That rested in Shiloh. And you can go to Shiloh. Right now they've got some red cows that everyone's going crazy about out there. But that's a 45, 50-minute drive from me. Just in fact, I'm going a third of the way there just to a family event tonight.
Yeah.
They want me off this land here, and they want them off that land there, and that's the river is over there, and the sea is over there. I'm river to the sea. I'm here.
Yeah.
So they do this march, and then where do they? But then they allow. Obviously, they have to allow, because actually legislation doesn't. You can't stop. In fact, it's very hard to stop a static protests. And again, if you think back to the EDL days, most of their protests were static protests. Why? Because that was the last thing that the police could block. They could block marches. They could always find some little, shopkeeper who would be inconvenienced by a march. So they'd pull out rules. But static protests, they had problems.
Yeah.
And so this weekend, you see this, this big hate march, and then a static protest of some very brave Jews, and the Iranians are fantastic, the real Iranians.
Yes.
And they're kettled at a safe distance so that they don't provoke too much. And I even saw that the Palestinian lovers had put up like visual barricades so they wouldn't have to see the obscenity of Israeli flags and people saying "free our hostages," because and then when someone goes near them with a sign that says Hamas is terrorist, apart from the affront to grammar, they go bananas. And that's the inverse. He's like, they're protected. And then the Daily Mail showed this picture of them covering up the Holocaust War Memorial the Parks Authority did.
Yeah.
Someone asked, did they cover up the memorial to Diana? Of course not, because we know that their problem is not with all memorials, hashtag. It's not hashtag all memorial, It's only the Jewish connected ones.
Yeah. But this is a problem that they will not admit. I'm gonna flick just really quickly on the screen, just because there's 2 points I want to show, and this is we talk about London a lot, but this is happening everywhere. And this is so this is both of these are in Germany, and they are basically they're demanding an Islamic caliphate. And then you go back to this one, and it's exactly the same. So these are the dangers that we could be seeing, and I think the UK government are doing a fantastic job of not admitting that there's a problem.
It's beyond not a problem. They're creating a much bigger problem. And for example, like this, this genocide thing. We're accused of genocide. I mean, I saw someone post that, in about, I don't know, it was like 2 months or whatever, it's the Houthis or the Tutsis killed 800,000 people with machetes. Okay. Yeah. They managed to kill 800,000 people with machetes. Now, the Hamas numbers are all complete bullshit.
Yeah.
When the dust settles, we are likely to have killed a few thousand, below 10,000 civilians at most. But it doesn't even matter. The gulf between 800,000 people killed with machete, that's a genocide. And the most careful fighting in urban combat ever.
Yeah.
And the point is that, I listened to LBC for a few minutes this morning.
According to Hamas, you can see the bodies from the moon.
Yeah, well, you can see everything from the moon. I mean, they have created this, and then they go with this international court thing. And then months later, this surprised-looking woman goes on the BBC and tells the even more surprised-looking BBC clone that no, actually, they didn't find a plausible case of genocide. They said that the case that they would have to answer could be I mean, it's ridiculous. And it all points in the direction of demonizing Israel and our self-defense.
Yeah.
Okay. But the consequences for Britain are that your defense, you can't, you will not be able to defend yourself. And what I said in that thread, and I'm scared to say this, because when you say things, they kind of gain weight, which is, it can happen. Look, you've had every different form of terrorism that Hamas pioneered, and Hezbollah, because Hezbollah, the giant suicide bombings was a Hezbollah favorite. You know, they took out the Marine barracks in Lebanon, and they blew up ships and stuff.
Yeah.
We've had all of that in London. I was there on 7/7. I was getting on a bus just as the bus driver said, you know, no more people, and closed the doors and drove off. I was just in a different part of London. I usually did take the Metropolitan line, but that day I'd gone down the Piccadilly instead. It's
Right.
like we've had 7/7 in London. You've had Ariana Grande. You've had the bridge attacks with knives. Every form. You've had vehicle jihad with running into people, and you've got those big, ugly concrete bollards now all over London.
Yeah.
That's pioneered by Hamas. That all starts here, and then you get it in London.
Yeah.
And which part of that? And when you embolden them by allowing them to walk through the street shouting that Jews need to die, and believe me, I know. I mean, again, back to Islam. Khaybar, Khaybar, ya Yahud. The army of Muhammad is coming to get you. Khaybar is the place where Muhammad personally oversaw the beheading of 700 Jews. It's like, it's not subtle, but it needs more context for the Metropolitan Police to decide whether Khaybar, Khaybar, ya Yahud is something that means something bad. You know, they need context. You know, they've got to check, like the swastikas.
Yeah, and that's what I was just going to say. No, you know, a swastika being tricked through London, you know, you've got to question that. And the cop says, well, it depends on the context. What? You know, and to be totally honest, I before we were sat in Tommy's trial, I thought that the police knew exactly. They know they're not that stupid. They know exactly what these things mean. And unfortunately, sitting through the trial, I think they are that stupid. And I mean that as, you know, as nice as I possibly can. But the caliber of police officers, a high ranking we saw in that trial, they couldn't tell their left from their right. Never mind.
I did. I read the judge's full judgment, and it is a clown show.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd like to see. I mean, I don't think I could be bothered to go through the full transcript, but just from what the judge wrote, you could tell he was totally exasperated by. And I mean, it's more than just. It's that they don't care enough. This whole thing of copy and pasting and not reading the actual laws. When I read laws like that section 34 or 5 or whatever it is, I read it and care has gone into drafting of this. It's like, it makes sense. Okay. I think it's a bit ridiculous, but I can understand occasions when, yes, you need to restrict freedom. I get that. And the law was carefully worded and drafted, and you can't, you know, do this to people who are working and all of that sort of stuff. And this policeman, who is a senior policeman, applying this law that obviously smart people have drafted, doesn't even read it, just copies and pastes and drops it in.
Yeah.
That's contempt. And I tell you, I read what the judge wrote, and if again, this is the whole two-tier justice system. When you consider that Tommy served 2 prison sentences, one quashed, and then a new trial for contempt of court for standing outside asking how they felt about their verdict, essentially, that's all he did. In fact, at the time, again, background knowledge, at the time I was running for Tommy's, I was one of the administrators of Tommy's Facebook page for quite a while, actually, when it went through this gigantic growth. And so I was doing, it was a Friday morning, and I usually do either a walk on the beach or a walk through a park nearby. So I was doing my Friday morning walk, and I get this notification because it's like I'm logged in as administrator on this page, and it's like Tommy's live. Okay, so I start watching this, and I watch this whole live stream.
Yeah. And
I'm like, oh God, no, Tommy, what are you doing? What are you doing? And then when they show up to arrest him, and I just knew it was going to be a complete shit show.
Yeah.
And there we go. And I had to rush home to like download and save the video because I was never sure when it's going to be deleted. And it's like but what the policemen did, all of them that appeared in that court, was contempt of court.
Yeah.
It was contempt for the entire justice. It was in contempt for the government. It was contempt for the legislator, because they were sloppily, worse than sloppily, they were disgustingly unequipped to try and enforce laws that they didn't even read.
Yeah.
If it was a higher court, if it was a higher judge, I reckon a judge could find them guilty of contempt of court for their behaviour.
Yeah.
They should be facing criminal charges, and not just for the pepper spray and so on. The deprivation of someone's liberty, other than taking their life, that's the highest punishment the government can mete out to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's done freely.
Yeah.
It's quite ironic. I was a senior manager both in the NHS and also the MOD, and I had to sometimes have stuff that crossed my desk, and I would think, I think that applies to that, and I think that applies to that. But then I would then go and read to make sure that, in fact, what I was thinking in my head was actually right. And then I would then copy and paste it if I thought it was right. And if I didn't think it was right, I would then ask I'd ask a colleague actually to just have a look and see if it fitted.
You'd scrutinise it, and even if you were wrong in that case, you'd be able to show your workings.
No.
You'd be able to show, well, this is the resources that I use. This is my thinking. But this guy was just operational learning. Sorry about that. Operational learning. And honest, that really wound me up.
And I've never, ever not had the original copy. And that to me was forgery. That was
fabricating of
evidence.
Yeah.
That was, again, I think that was a criminal act. If you made up receipts for your taxes, you'd sure as hell be in prison. You know, you can't make up documents. And again, we have to get over the fact that this deprivation of liberty, which is what it was. He was banged up for 2 nights. He was banged up for another night after the thing. And then he was deprived of freedom of movement. Those are huge. And then this bit blows my mind. The Crown Prosecution Service actually took this to a trial.
Yeah.
They should have been running for the exit, because obviously now the claim against them is going to be, I hope, massive. I don't know whether this marks a turning point in Tommy's life. I mean, you know, I've watched it for years. I don't know if most people won't remember the incident in Cambridge pub when he was with his kids.
Yeah.
And that was filmed by Tommy on Periscope. Basically, he was in the town for a football match, but I don't think he went to the football match. He was watching it on the TV in the pub, and the police just rocked in, grabbed him and said, "Get out of town." And it's like, why? And he kind of resisted, but he didn't resist too much because he had his kids with him, and the kids were crying and screaming, and he periscoped the whole thing. And at that time, Periscope was this sort of the live thing on Twitter. It didn't record videos. It's like they were up for only 24 hours and then they just disappeared. Yeah. They saved those. And those were later taken down in court and used in evidence on his side. But he brought a claim of wrongful arrest, and that failed dramatically. You know,
it's unreal, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can I ask two things, Brian?
Yeah.
One is this, that for the last 5-6 years, the woke and the establishment, particularly in student unions and universities, have said, "Oh, this is a safe space. This is the UKIP can't come on this campus, or the Conservatives can't come on this campus, or you're speaking about net zero, anti-net zero, you can't come on this campus." Yeah. It's a free space and it's secure. But that doesn't include Jews, does it?
Well, it doesn't include the wrong Jews, and the wrong Jews are, you know, the 90% of us who are openly Zionist, i.e., and so it's like, look, let's clear something up, even for the far right knuckle draggers. Zionism is really very, very simple. Jews live in Israel.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it. And the thing is, Israel, if you can go biblical, I mean, I call myself in my bio on X and stuff, I'm an indigenous rights activist. And of course, I do this to wind up the left, but it's real. And I get it from a Canadian. Well, he's not Canadian. He's Métis is his tribe, but his tribal lands happen to be in Canada today. So he taught me all about this indigenous thing, which is that there are 5 markers of indigeneity that matter. And again, the UN has adopted this. This is kind of settled science or pseudoscience, as everything on that side is. It land, language, culture, spirituality, and blood. Those are the 5 key traits. Now, Jews and Judaism is actually quite complicated on the blood thing because we've accepted converts. There's a thing in the Old Testament, there's a thing called the Book of Ruth. If you go read the Book of Ruth, it's all about a convert. And that, again, people don't even get quite how biblical Israel really is at its roots.
Yeah.
The rules around Ruth, the treatment of Ruth marks how we treat converts today. So if you go through a proper Orthodox conversion, and who's Orthodox and who isn't, and who's an Orthodox rabbi, that's complicated and stuff. I don't have to agree with all of it, but there's a process, and it's quite rigorous. In fact, the new president of Argentina, Milei, he wants to convert to Judaism, and he was already talking with Chabad about an Orthodox conversion to Judaism. And then he got elected to be the president of Argentina. And his rabbi, because he has a rabbi in Argentina, said to him, look, we love this. We love that you're trying to convert and so on, but you're going to have to put this on hold because other than Israel, there really isn't another country in the world that you can run whilst being Jewish, because you can't just shut down on a Friday night and say, okay, I'm not going to use a microphone. You can't, like, the restrictions that are on an Orthodox Jew, and when you're trying to convert, you have to do it, to a greater degree than I do, certainly. You've got to keep kosher food, and you've got to have a kosher home, and you've got to observe the Sabbath with all the rules around electrical use and not using computers, which again, one of the things, I've got lots of modern Orthodox friends, i.e. people who, they wear a kippah, but other than that, you wouldn't know. And they're modern Orthodox. They shut their phones off at 5 o'clock on a Friday evening, and they don't come back on until Saturday night. And then they, their first tweet is what happened, and sort of what did I miss? And I've actually come to regard that self-discipline. I think it's a brilliant thing. I think it's what the world actually needs. Yeah. You don't have to call it Sabbath. You don't have to, but pick a day, just read a book, pick a day, don't open the television.
Yeah,
turn on the television.
Well, that's what
it sounds lovely.
That's what our Sunday was about, and that's what your Sabbath was about. But I didn't actually realise. I know that the Romans used to fight you on a Saturday because you couldn't walk a certain distance. I didn't realise that was still in there.
But all the rules go, like on October 7th was obviously Sabbath. And it was actually Simchat Torah. It was the end of the Sukkot holiday. It was a hugely symbolic day on which to attack.
Yeah.
But there's again, one of the laws of the Sabbath is that you can break all the other laws to save a life. And jumping into self-defense is like, so one of our good friends here is the lifeguard at the nearest beach to us, and he's a family from Yemen. Actually, his wife is Danish. Again, this whole mixed thing. Yeah. So he's this black, rippled, he's short, but he's like built surfer build, and he's the chief lifeguard at the beach. But he works on, and he's quite religious, sort of puts on tefillin, the little boxes, and wraps those on and does his prayers and so on. But he works on Saturdays because his job is to save people's lives as a lifeguard. So his work must continue on Shabbat. It's not an option.
Right.
We're not dumb here. I mean,
Yeah.
I think there's rules about turning on switches and lights and stuff, whatever. But the point, the thing I'm coming back to is that the only place you can actually do that stuff easily without attracting attention is here. Jews, like in the rest of the world, there's complicated rules to do with whether you can push a pushchair, and it determines whether you have a closed boundary around the place. It's called an eruv. This gets complicated. You have to put up a wire, and it has to be unbroken, and the rabbi has to walk around the neighborhood checking that the wire hasn't been broken anywhere. It's like they put these strictures on themselves. And then you have fights in councils because somebody objects to a little wire, a fish wire that nobody can see.
Yeah.
And in Israel, we don't have to have that fight. We can be Jewish here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now we'll fight over it because we'll have big arguments over whether the trains should run on Shabbat because the religious say that they shouldn't, and the rest of us sometimes want to use a train. This is the place where we should have those fights. We don't go to England and start telling you, don't run your trains on Shabbat. It's like, that would be ridiculous. We don't come to England and say, don't eat, it's Passover right now, it's Pesach, don't eat bread. And like in the whole country here now, it's like, people don't know, my friend Imshin on X, she's the one that shares all these videos from Gaza of, the nice houses and she's sharing a lot of how it was and the restaurants, and she's also now sharing all the restaurants in Rafah that are serving shawarma. By the way, much cheaper than here. They use our currency, so we can tell. So it's like, I know that it's 35 shekels for a shawarma up the road here, and it's 15 shekels in Gaza. It's like, what?
But I dare you to go to Gaza and pick it up.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. And Walt doesn't go that far. But anyway, she posted the other day. She posted yesterday that the price of a croissant in Gaza was quite expensive, and I replied to her, it's like, God, you can't find a croissant for love nor money in Tel Aviv, but that's because it's Passover. So it's like there's no bread; it's a piece of matzah. Okay, we'll get croissant tomorrow. But these are Jewishish things, and that Zionism is doing Jewish stuff and making Jewish decisions for Jews ourselves here.
Yeah.
Are we pluralistic? Of course we are. That famous picture of Tommy wearing the Mossad shirt, standing next to this big guy with a hat, that's an Aramaic priest, and that was in Nazareth. And we went to meet him. What does it mean to be an Aramaic Christian? Well, it means he's not an Arab, or he doesn't consider himself to be an Arab Christian. He's pre-Arab. His whole identity is pre the Arab invasion and conquest.
Yeah.
He is indigenous. He has an absolute indigenous identity, and that identity is tied to Israel because that identity evolved here. Now, it evolved after Jews, clearly, because, Jesus came along in, what year was that? Oh, yeah, 0. And the hard to remember. Well, I would actually literally have to look it up. I mean, my phone tells me that it's what year is it? It's year 5784. But unless I look at my phone, I don't know that. So we've got these indigenous identities here. We've got Samaritans. By the way, just that the hills where I said to you Shiloh is actually just a bit to the south. If I go due east of here, you get to a place called Nablus. Okay, what's Nablus? Nablus is a made-up name. Nablus is actually built on a biblical city called Shechem. Shechem is the site of Joseph's tomb. And why is it called Nablus? Well, it's because when the Romans decided 138 or whatever his name was, in 138 after the second revolt, when they decided to wipe the Jewish name off the map, Judea,
Judea.
and they came up with Syria Palestina, they also made new cities and renamed stuff. And one of the names they came up with was very inventive, because the Romans were really good at inventing stuff. It was called Neapolis, new city.
Yeah.
And it was on the site of Shem, but it was called Neapolis. Now, Arabic, as we all know, does not have any sound or letter that looks or sounds like P. Palestine. That P doesn't exist in Arabic. So that's why they call themselves Falastini with a F. And so what happened where did the name Nablus come from? Well, Neapolis became Nablus.
Yeah.
And that's the Arab city. And right in the middle is Shem. But on the hill overlooking Shem is a hill called Mount Gerizim. I took Tommy up there. We stood. And in Mount Gerizim is the place where the Samaritans are from. Everybody knows the Samaritans. They're still there. There's more of them actually in Rishon LeZion because it's just better than living in they used to live in Nablus. They pretty much all left Nablus because of the Arabs.
Right.
They're still on Mount Gerizim. They've got like a little museum of Samaritan things. If you want to learn about the Samaritans, you go there. And again, another deeply indigenous culture. It's kind of a bizarre Jewishness, but they regard that Mount Gerizim is what we think is on Har Habayit, which is the Temple Mount. It's changed, but it's coherent. It's been observed for 2,000+ years in the same spot.
Mm.
And they're recognizably maintaining traditions going forward. That's indigenous.
Yeah.
That's what Jews are here. What isn't indigenous is the remnants of Arab conquests and people who flooded in for work from the late 1800s when Jews started building farms.
Mm.
That's not indigenous. Rights of long-standing presence we would give them if they stopped trying to murder us.
Yeah.
The murdering us is a sticking point. It's really hard to be kind and gracious. You see, the Samaritans do not rise up and murder us. The Aramaic Christians, on the whole, in Nazareth, not a problem. The Druze fight in our army against the Arab Islamic terrorists. Many of them died on October the 7th. They killed Arabs, they killed Bedouin. It was terrifying. Okay, last thing. I just talk. Sorry, you never ever get the word in anyway. One thing I just want to tell your audience, which has not come out yet, and I don't know how it will. Here in Israel, and my Hebrew's not brilliant, but I sit next to my wife in the evenings and I watch the television, and I kind of get most of it, sort of. But we've had a lot of television about October the 7th. Yeah. We've had a lot of interviews. We've had a lot of in-depth examinations of various bits of what happened. And, there's the cold conspiracy thing, Bibi let it happen at 3 a.m. And then, they knew all the cell phones, all of this stuff. Every single thing I've seen points to a catastrophic lapse in imagination as to what they could or would do, which again comes from not studying Islam. It points to 10 years or 15 years or even 20 years of underestimating their desire to murder us. Oh. And we went through the whole Black Lives Matter nonsense here. And what did Black Lives Matter manifest in Israel? Well, it manifested as the Gaza protests. What were they? They would run up to the strip, children and women to the front, of course, and they would test us. Now, our armed forces didn't look at it that way, but we didn't mow them all down with machine guns and we didn't blow them all up with airstrikes. They were probing, they were testing, they were checking, and they played the long game. They played a 15-year game. They even went quiet with the rockets to lull us. And that's why I talk about two things online all the time. I talk about the deceit process. I won't call it the other name. And I talk about the two-state delusion. And too many Israelis, too many lefties here, and many of the ones who were murdered right next to that fence were lefties, were Israelis. They were doing the whole coexist bumper sticker shit. They got murdered, that brutally, horribly. And a lot of people have woken up. And we won't know until we have an election how many. Bibi is problematic from personality-wise and with his wife, and it's so much. And again, it's so much more complicated than the cartoonish presentations you get from the BBC and so on, who just miss the point so often. You know, like these protests that were happening before October the 7th and that have mutated. They're being funded by some of the same bad elements, the Soros thing, there's Wexler, there's all sorts of bad motivations. And people are going to them now. But are they anti-government? Not 100%. And do we know what we would do other than Bibi? And even begrudgingly, you find people who don't like Bibi admit that on the world stage he's pretty good. You know, again, the last part, the bit that you're missing out on is that we can explain what happened on October 7th. We will get to the much more detailed. We'll have a massive board of inquiry that will, you know, that really will uncover this stuff. Because again, you have to remember this army of ours, it's not remote, it's us. My kid will be in it in 18 months' time. My first kid. The next one is, you know, at some point I'll have both kids in the army. And that is a frightening prospect. My wife is, you know, not pleased. It's a terrifying prospect. But the army is us. It's our brothers and mothers and sisters and sons and uncles. Everybody knows something. So, you know, would widespread slaughter in Gaza? It's unthinkable if you know Israeli society. There's just no way for it to have happened.
So Brian, can I say that first of all, the BBC never ever say that Israel is a democracy and it's the only one in the region. 1, 2, you've got the right to defend yourselves, and 3, I'm hardline, and I would push them back 200 miles past the Goliath Heights. I'd shove them and push them and get rid of them, and I'd have Judea back on the map. That's me, and it's not because I like, and I've got to preface this. With the bombing of the St. David Hotel with the British Army and the kidnapping of 2 sergeants, I am not a lover, you know, a blind lover.
We really fucked the British when we needed to. Oh yeah, absolutely. And what happened? Well, firstly, the King David Hotel was a military base. I mean, it wasn't very many, but yeah, we killed British military whenever necessary. My friend was an elderly gentleman who was one of the captains of one of the ships that became the Exodus in the movie.
Yeah,
he got to Haifa, captured, taken to Cyprus, interned on Cyprus. He fought against the British. He tried to blow them up. I don't think he ever succeeded in killing Britain. But yeah, we fought a war to get our country back because we're the only indigenous people ever in the history of the world to have taken our country back from jihad and from the British but the British the British really didn't want it. And this gets to the root of the reason why the only good thing I have to say is that the Palestinians fight as if they're trying to remove the British from India or the French from Algeria. They fight a guerrilla warfare that will remove a colonial occupying force. Absolutely. the thing is, we're not a colonial occupying force, and we've got nowhere else to go. So they are fighting exactly the wrong war, and they've been fighting the wrong war always. They cannot and will not. There isn't going to come a point where they're going to kill one more Jew, and the 7 million of us are going to say, "Okay, that's it. Finally, I'm leaving." It's not. And we got our independence, and then again, everybody, you read on the internet from the geniuses who've never read a book that Israel was handed. The Jews were handed Israel as a present after the Holocaust by the UN. No, we weren't. We got a vote in the UN, a partition that was shit. It was a crap deal. We should never have even said yes to it, but we did. The Arabs said no, and when we fought them, and the British ran away. And the British ran away. I mean, if you go study the history, there are some very, very, very good Brits who were here. But unfortunately, once again, the British elites were camel corps to the hilt. They were flying. Again, I knew a guy who's passed away who flew in the 1st Air Force. He flew in some rickety Messerschmitt that we'd stolen from Czechoslovakia. He flew in this, and he said he was flying up against Egyptian Spitfires with British Spitfires a few thousand feet above, telling them what to do. That's what was going on. And we had the Royal Jordanian Army, which took Judea and Samaria. They had British officers standing at the back.
Yeah.
So, and what did Britain do? It left. There were key points in a place called Sfat. There was the police station in Sfat. There was a famous battle about this.
Yeah.
The British were supposed to give it to the Jews. What did they do? A day earlier, they snuck out and gave it and told the Arabs to take it. Yeah. And we had to build guns literally to take back that police station. So it's all very fascinating. And I've studied it. I've read about it. I've read actual books and books that disagree with each other. And this is how, not 3-second videos on TikTok.
Yes. Yeah.
You're right. I mean, the issue. I've told Dan this tale, so he's going to get bored now and yawn. But when I worked at NATO, the Americans would say, "Oh, it's okay. The British will always make the right decision when they've when they've gone through every other option," and that's what we did with
Correct.
Balfour Declaration was there, and what did we do? Nothing. And
it was more complicated because
out of the jaws of victory,
there was all this horse trading over the oil and giving. You had to give Jordan, the Cashemite king, this country, which is a made-up country. You had to give the Syrians in France. That had to be another one. The Saudi king, he had to be given this stuff. There's a great story from the life of Winston Churchill where Churchill came and had this meeting. I can't remember where the meeting was, with the King Ibn Saud. And this King Saud sent word to Churchill that telling Churchill that he should not drink or smoke during the meal with King Saud. Let me see if I can find it quickly enough, because it is just such a good Churchill. Yeah, Churchill's response to King Saud. I'll read it word for word. It's in the book. "I was the host, and I said that if it was his religion that made him say such thing, my religion prescribed as an absolute sacred ritual, smoking cigars and drinking alcohol before, after, and if need be, during all meals and the intervals between them. Complete surrender."
Excellent.
And now we've got British government ministers going to Iran and putting on hijabs. That's the difference. It's like, and this was a meeting where they were talking about, really, maybe this is where we can end. They were talking about a Middle East federation headed by Ibn Saud, And what the king was offering actually was that a Jewish Palestine would be an integral and independent part of this giant pan-Arab empire caliphate that the king would then be proud to rule over, and the Jews would be his protected dhimmis, and that was the deal that was on the table to Churchill, and that's the deal that Saudis have been offering us ever since. It's like just put away the name and stuff, just be dhimmis, and we'll look after you. We'll be nice to you this time.
Yeah.
And again, you're heading towards dhimmitude in the UK. Your police are dhimmis. Everything is gearing towards. And dhimmitude, this is the how long are we going for?
Well, it's totally on you, because I know you've got plans to get to.
It's okay. Dhimmitude is a word that tries to describe. I'm going to send you a video later. You should put it out, actually.
I've never heard of that word, I have to say.
Dhimmitude.
Never heard
Dhimmitude.
of it.
Okay, dhimmitude is a word. Now, it comes from Arabic and an Arabic root of dhamma, which is to blame, to find fault with, to criticize.
Right.
Dhimmitude in this use was actually, it's a whole giant concept in Islam. And it was coined by an amazing woman called Batya Orr, is her pen name, Giselle Littman. But it describes this condition under which people of the book, that's Christians and Jews, can live under Muslim rule. And the history of dhimmitude, Batya, have I got her books here? Somewhere over there I've got her books. The history of dhimmitude, which is airbrushed out, is the myth of Islamic tolerance, is the buzzword. It's like bull effing shit.
Yeah.
What happens? What happened with dhimmitude is that you're not a second-class citizen. Some people say that. No, you're not a citizen. You're sub-citizen. You're tolerated. And the way Islam was successful was that it conquered vast areas. And at first, most people did not convert, because Islam is a ruling class. It is a ruling elite. It is not a system. It's not a democratic system, obviously, but it's not a system that works when the majority is Muslim. And when you have a majority Muslim country, unless you have vast unearned oil wealth, generally the society is dysfunctional and collapses. And we see that, And the reason for that is that the dhimmis, the non-Muslim peoples living in Muslim lands, they were the people doing the work. In Turkey, it was Janissaries. In the Ottoman Empire. The history of Islam is that the arc is that they conquer an area, a small minority of Muslims take over, they appoint some locals who collaborate, basically, and they're the dhimmi collaborators. And then they rule through fear, and they subdivide the dhimmis. So the Jewish dhimmis fight the Christian dhimmis, or they both bend over backwards not to be hated more.
Yeah.
In the Quran, the Jews and the Christians are cursed every day in the prayers. And the simplified version is that they curse those who have gone astray and those who've been led astray. Now, the Jews, we're the ones who have gone astray. We were given the Quran. We airbrushed Muhammad out of it, and we turned it into what we call the Hebrew Bible and the Torah. And then later on, Muhammad came along with his revelation from God and said, no, sorry, it's not that. It's this one, and you made it all up. We were Muslims all along, and you Jews corrupted the Holy Quran. So we're the ones who have gone astray, and the Christians are the ones who are led astray, because it's clear that Christians follow more closely the Hebrew Bible and don't recognize Muhammad either.
It was the Jews that took us astray.
It was, and it's even worse than that. Borrowing from a very Kabbalistic Jewish philosophical line, a lot of the Muslims believe, and again, this will blow your mind if you haven't heard this before. They kind of work on the assumption that everybody is born Muslim, and that your mother your evil, especially if it's a Jewish one, your evil mother takes you away from Islam. So when you find someone who has converted to Islam, when they've done it sort of recently, especially, they call themselves as reverts. They have reverted to Islam. That comes from this, that they were always Muslim. Their bad mother, and it's always on the woman, of course, because
Yeah, of course.
Islam is just 100% misogynistic.
Yeah.
In a way that Judaism really isn't. You reverted back to Islam because you were originally Islamic. In fact, again, they stole that from there's a line of Kabbalistic thinking, which is that when you're in the womb, you know and understand the whole of the Torah, all the Jewish law. You know it all as a pre-born infant.
Yeah.
And then at the moment of birth, you forget it all. And your mission, should you choose to accept it, your mission throughout the rest of your life is to gather as much of that knowledge back that you lost at birth.
Yeah.
And again, that's this is like, when people say they've studied the Talmud, this is what Talmudic stuff is about, not the nonsense. But the Muslims take that, corrupt it, and turn it into this concept of revert. So, for example, they all believe that that Moses was a Muslim who led the children of Israel, who were Muslims, into Israel for the Muslims, because they were the good Jews. It's like the whole thing. You can't. Our Western brains. Funnily enough, I find here in Israel, the Jews from Arab land are much more able to cope with paradoxes than us Western kind of.
Yeah.
The Western philosophy just doesn't understand how someone can believe that Islam sprung up in 700 and something, but that it came before Judaism. They fundamentally believe that.
Yeah.
You and I struggle to hold those thoughts together. Okay.
I wonder why. I think, I know you've got a busy afternoon coming up, so I don't want to keep you much longer. There was just one thing I did want to ask, and it is regarding the current news regarding British troops, boots on ground in Gaza to deliver humanitarian aid. We were speaking in the car just on the way, and my problem is I don't think the British government can see further than the end of their nose, because they don't think about, well, what if? What if they go there, and what if something happens? Will there need?
Well, we've already seen what happens. I mean, we had 3, for some reason, SAS trained aid workers, which always.
Oh yes, yes, that.
I mean, okay, all right, I understand their need for security, but that seemed weird at the time, and I don't think we've heard that story to the full. But look. Nobody's going to want to go in. No, the Americans have already been taking mortar fire on their pontoon thing they're trying to build.
Yeah.
Flying your planes over Jordan from Cyprus. Thank you very much. I think that's as close as you should get. That was much appreciated here. I mean, I watched that from my balcony, which is bizarre because I'm a long way from Jerusalem, but the stuff that they threw at us that night, Saturday, 3 weeks ago, that was not normal. I mean, I've watched hundreds of Iron Dome interceptions above Tel Aviv, because what happens is I'm just technically outside of one area in another area. So if alarms ring across the middle or the south of Tel Aviv, I can go on my balcony and watch. Only if they come into my neighborhood do I go into this room.
Yeah.
So I've seen hundreds of Iron Dome interceptions, and the noise is incredible. But what was coming in from these things that were coming in from space were coming in freaking hot. Because again, when they shoot from Gaza, we don't see their rocket. We only ever see our rockets going up and then an explosion where they meet. This stuff was coming in hot and glowing. So having British, American jets, whatever, out there in Jordan in the night shooting down drones to make sure the missile defense system worked. That was much appreciated, but
Yeah.
you don't want boots on the ground in Gaza. And by the way, there's no humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
No.
Every day on TikTok, Imshin is sharing on X the pictures from TikTok. There's food everywhere. The only reason there is a shortage of food is if Hamas wishes there to be a shortage of food. Hamas is making it's making a ton of money by selling the aid, because I think it's their last stand to try and fill up. The world does not want us to go into Rafah, which definitely is why we must do it. We have to cut the line between Egypt and Gaza, because that's still open. God knows where our hostages are, whether they're still in Gaza or not. We don't know. It is, you don't, again, this is something else. Like, it's impossible to convey to outsiders what this has done to the country, what it means to have this many people captured for so long in such circumstances. And
So
the
what
fact
is it
that
now? Is it in 6 months and 3 weeks?
yeah.
And nobody
200 and something.
raises it. Nobody raises it. So, and that was
Well,
what I wanted to say before we finish. That
I mean, that's mine, and that's
what's the solution? And let's have a moment about those hostages.
nothing. And they'll walk through. They'll demand so-called ceasefire. But what is a ceasefire? Ceasefire doesn't mean anything. Oh, and every single day we're getting drones and rockets from Hezbollah in the north. We have to deal with that. We've got 70 or 80,000 Israelis who are not at home, who are in hotels all over the place.
Yeah.
Their houses have been blown. Hundreds and hundreds of houses have been blown up by, you see, what Hezbollah can do because of the mountainous terrain in the north. They can fire these anti-tank missiles that go sideways. And there isn't... the Iron Dome can defend quite a large area from stuff coming down, but it can't defend stuff going sideways. Yeah. We have systems that can defend the system that's on our tanks and our armored personnel carriers can defend against the anti-tank missiles that go sideways, but we can't put 1,000 tanks spaced 100 meters apart. It doesn't work. So you don't understand. It's like every single day my phone beeps and tells me that there's alarms going off in largely evacuated towns in the north. Yeah. And someone died, an Arab who was in a convoy going to fix something. Hezbollah saw the convoy at night and shot at it and killed an Arab. An Arab Israeli.
The thing is, Brian, that you cannot have a ceasefire because that only allows them to regroup and reform. It's got to be total war until they give the Hamas terrorists over to you, or you will kill them. There is no other option, and that's I'm sorry, but that's otherwise.
Be sorry.
It's like a boil that you don't lance, and this is a boil.
I'll be sorry if my government doesn't do it. We need to. Am I pleased with Bibi? I don't know. I don't know what's going. I tell you, I've learned a sort of a humility, which is that anybody who says that they know what's going on probably doesn't know what's going on, and everybody who knows what's going on doesn't say what's going on.
I don't like Bibi, but I think he's the best man at this point. And you can argue about elections afterwards, but at the moment, he's a wartime prime minister, and he needs to be firm. And I'm sorry, the Israelis are great at going like this. We're not bothered. And in this instance, you need to do that.
Yeah,
we need to do that more. But I mean, taking us to the ICJ and actual arrest warrants against our leadership.
But who's doing that? South Africa, they're a Marxist government.
They're a Marxist. I know. Listen, I renounced my South African citizenship in 1997. So, and I'm not planning on getting it back. That's for sure. The way that we're and we're obviously threading a needle with Obama 3, Biden, and clearly that's what's going on over there. This is the third Obama presidency. Obama started this appeasement of Iran. I've got lots of crazy conspiracy theories about the fact that I think that Obama had a Shia Islamic upbringing in Indonesia.
Right.
I think that's that part of his upbringing is not understood, and for some reason he has always wanted to elevate the Shia and Iran, and his presidency made that clear, and that policy is carried on to this day. And we're just treading water here, waiting to see if we can get Trump back. I don't know. I don't think that fixes everything, but I think it would help.
And bomb those nuclear facilities, because that's the other thing that you need to do. Until they say we're not going to now annihilate Israel, then you've got to do it. And I'm sorry, it might sound unpopular.
Well, it's self-defense.
It's total war. That's
what total war. We should be. And I don't know what we did, what our response was to that Saturday night. And again, that was the largest. Even the Russians haven't managed to deploy that much crap against Ukraine, and they're right next door to it. It's like, it's perplexing. I mean, I understand, you have to deal with the Americans, but I want us to be self-sufficient in 155 millimeter shells. I want us to be building all of this stuff. And this is what I'm going to be, when it comes to electing the next government, these are the questions I'm going to be asking is, are we still dependent on the Americans? Obviously, we still got these F-35 planes, and clearly they're working. They're doing something good. But we have to build all the rest of it. We have to build Iron Dome missile interceptors in Israel, on Israeli soil. We have to do all of that.
R&D, though, is very good.
We developed all of that tech, and I've been to talk to the guys who built it. And again, that it was Israel that developed it because it's not crazily priced, and it came in on time, on budget, and it freaking well worked. And again, all of this stuff, Arrow 2, these missiles that were intercepting ballistic missiles on the edge of space, 50 of them. Okay, nobody has ever done that. I mean, I read this great post. I mean, I'm not very religious, but I'm very conscious that there's a lot to be learned there. And this guy wrote this post who said he was a physicist who was involved in the defense program, and I'm a physicist too. And he said, if you're going to go and do all of the math, the odds of all of that stuff working on the first time you ever tried it for real, all of these tests, because I know they go to Alaska, they test this stuff in Alaska. One of my neighbors actually was involved in the Arrow program, and he used to fly to Alaska, and they would do, interception tests in Alaska. To have it work that well on the first time, it is probably a miracle of some sort. I understand computers. I'm developing all sorts of website stuff here. Getting JavaScript to work is a miracle. But getting that much shit all to do the right thing at the right time, with the time pressure that you've got an Mach 8 missile falling from space, my mind is blown. And to do it 30 times.
That is fantastic, because we, literally just before yourself, we were interviewing someone else and just trying to get this to work, this microphone, and there's no logic why it stopped working. It just didn't, and it was just like, well, I'm not working anymore, and that's a microphone. So I totally get where you're coming from, with that.
All I can
That's
say,
what's so frustrating about October 7th was that this country gets so much stuff right, and when we pull together, we are amazing. Every building. It's together we'll win, but we are an amazing. We're an amazing people. We're bizarre. We're strange. We've got contradictions. But we've got this history. We know who we are, and I mean, we've got immigration. I've got it. This has to be the last thing. The wife's probably gonna.
That's right.
I had this chat with Philip de Winter. of the Flams Belang a long time ago. He came on a trip. We toured the Shטachim, the occupied territories, and we were having lunch in the port of Ashdod, which is one of the places that's been heavily rocketed, in a nice marina. And I told him about Israel's immigration story, which is the one that's least known, is that from 1989, from the fall of the wall, to 1999, so 10-year period, Israel took in something like a little over a million Russian Jews.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Now, prior to that, the population of Israel was something like 4.4 million. Today we're over 9. So it went up from 4.4, and then I think by the time they took in a million, 10 years later, with births and with the Arabs, it had grown to 5.7. That 10-year act of immigration is the greatest number of immigrants any Western nation has ever or will ever absorb in history. It dwarfs what the Germans did with 2 million Arabs into 90 million or whatever their population is. It totally dwarfs that. Now, were there issues? Yeah. One of them is that today, when I pick up the phone to call the phone company, it's press 1 for Hebrew, press 2 for Arabic, press 3 for Russian, press 4 for English. So Russian is now pushed English out of the phone menu system.
Yeah.
Okay, that's an issue. But the point was, they came here to be Russian. And I learned this. I got here in 2009. And I think in 2010 or something, I went to a Davis Cup tennis match. I'm not big into football or soccer, but Davis Cup, is the international tennis thing. And Davis Cup is not like Wimbledon. You make a lot of noise, you cheer for your team. And it was Israel against Russia, back when they were allowed to be Russia. And this was a basketball stadium, for tennis, converted for tennis, and it was full, sellout crowd. And I think 2/3 of the crowd were Russian Israelis. They were all cheering for Israel. All of them. There was this tiny group who had traveled with the Russian team who were shouting for Russia. Everyone else shouting for Israel. And this was the Tebbit test, if you remember, if you're old me.
Yeah.
Norman Tebbit proposed this test because he went to Edgbaston and it was England versus Pakistan, or and the crowd was for Pakistan, and it didn't feel like an England home match. Yeah. Israel got it right, because we've got a culture, we've got a people. Now, the Russians, do they keep kosher? No. You go, if you want to buy pork and shellfish, you go to any place where there's lots of Russians. That's what you do. But do they want to be Israelis? Yes. Are all of their children now Israeli? Yes. They came here with a view to being Jewish and Israeli and adopting a culture that we express Israeliness. We're going to have our national day this year. Is going to be an unbelievable event, because our national day is a 2-day thing. The first day is the memorial for fallen in wars. I'm going to crack up. It's the memorial for fallen in wars and terror, and it's going to be horrific. And it goes from sundown to sundown. But then at sundown, at the end of that day, we flip, and it's Yom Ha'atzmaut. It's the celebration. It's the Independence Day. The two are joint.
Yeah. One rolls into
Anyway.
the other. Yeah.
Yeah. And what happens is at 8:00, it's just like suddenly party, because the day itself of Yom HaZikaron, I'm next to a huge cemetery. The traffic is going to be catastrophic here. There'll be army helicopters, because there'll be a massive military funeral service here. And I've been, one of my friends was stabbed in the back in a shopping centre a few years back, and by a kid, a 17-year-old Arab, stabbed him in the back. My friend turned. The Arab ran. My friend shot the Arab. Didn't kill him, but my friend died on the spot there. And but his shot stopped the Arab going and knifing anyone else. Been to his funeral on Yom HaZikaron a couple of times. Well, been to this where he's buried on Yom HaZikaron. It's a big deal. And this year we've buried more than anything in history, more than wars. This is a war, but the number of new names that we add to this list, and what happens is the television, like the main television channel, all it does is just shows names. And it shows stories.
And that's what should happen here. That's in May, isn't it, Brian?
It's the date. I'd have to look up exactly what the Palestinians celebrate May the 14th as their Nakba Day, but we celebrate Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaZmaut on their Hebrew calendar days.
Yeah.
So I'd have to look up to say exactly which day it is this year. But yeah, it's in May. If it's an astonishing, I wanted to bring Tommy here one time, but we never quite managed it. And this year it's going to be intense. Too much, actually. I wouldn't want a camera anywhere near me.
But I'm not even going to pretend to imagine I could even put myself in that position. But from what I'm getting from it, that is something that Israel should be absolutely proud of. Is that you've got you can see yourself how passionate, how much it means to you. For example, when we celebrate VE Day, D Day, thing like that, kids don't even know. They're not bothered. I go down to the cenotaph or one of the memorials, and I'm looking around and I'm thinking, the majority of children here have been brought by here with their parents. They haven't got a clue what's going on. They got no self-pride on history. And the fact that you've got something that means so much to you is absolutely something to be so proud of.
Yeah, and that's how you define a country. When you know your history.
Absolutely.
You know your history, you know who you are, you know why, what you mean, what it means to be who you've got to have history. I mean, like Britain, the thing that drives me the most crazy about Britain, I would say that the greatest achievement of Britain is slavery. Ending slavery.
Yeah.
Every single culture in history almost has had slaves. Okay? Jews, funnily enough, legislated slavery out a long time ago, and that's what our story of Passover is about. Us stopping being slaves. And what happened after that was that we legislated slavery out of Judaism. We made it so ridiculously burdensome to hold slaves that nobody wanted to, so you just employed people, and that was an honest trade. You stopped owning people. And the transition away from slavery was slow and gradual in Judaism, but it happened. What did the British do with the Royal Navy? They made it. They took a decision one day based on the Hebrew Bible, of course, based on all men are created in the image of God. That makes slavery untenable. As soon as you believe God made image, as soon as you believe Commandment 1, honor it's Commandments 1 and 6. You join those two together because that's how you write them down. 1 to 5, 6 to 10. You join 1 and 6 together. Honor the God. You join. Thou shalt not murder, not kill, murder. The British took that and eradicated slavery across the world. And right now, I hear you beating yourselves up on whether you should pay reparations. No, the whole world of slaves should be paying reparations, or at least saying thank you to the British and the Royal Navy, who went around the world for the first time ever. The military power and might of an empire was devoted to this task of ending slavery worldwide. Later on, the Americans got the idea and joined, but without the Royal Navy, the international slave trade would have continued. It was a decision made in Britain, in the Parliament, and then carried out by the people of Britain. That should be one of the most proud moments, because it is so human. It is such an extension of real Christian, and I would say Jewish as well, values of all men are created in the image of God. And the way you go and enforce that is you take the Royal Navy, this massive, at that time, it was just the most powerful thing on the planet. And what did they do with it? They instead of they turned it from being a conquering, thing to take countries, turned it around and said, okay, we're going to just end this slavery thing. We don't like it anymore.
Well, the Armada
Amazing.
Patrol is still in existence, and it's the world's oldest continuous anti-slavery patrol by the Royal Navy. We finished paying reparations for paying the slave owners out of their business, and I think it was about 2010. So we paid for 200 years, and yet these cheeky cheeky furkers want us to now pay on top of that.
Yeah, and not only that, it's being taught in schools, so all our children, rather than the way you would advertise it and promote it, it's the total opposite. It's a shame. It's something that we should be absolutely embarrassed about.
Slavery, the empire and slavery, the abolition of slavery via the power of the British Empire and the British Navy should be a story that unites and is the most proud thing that Britain can talk about. I've never heard anyone say what I just said.
No.
Have you ever heard anyone say that?
No. No, nobody.
We do on a regular basis, but
I know,
you know
but
what I mean. You know what I mean? Yes. Yep.
I mean, stand up there on a stage in Parliament, Rishi Sunak. I mean, really, and thank Britain for ending slavery worldwide. Thank
there's even been a debate, Brian, because there was something like about 16,000 Royal Navy sailors were killed, murdered, when they tried to stop slavery ships, and there's a new war memorial for those men, and people like Sadiq Khan and others don't want it built, but it should be built.
It's the greatest. I think, as a I'm British by naturalization. I arrived as a baby, so I lived all my life there until I left. But I naturalized, so I stood in a little solicitor's office somewhere and swore an oath to the Queen. I actually did that. It was the Queen, dear old Queen. Anyway, I'm being told I must go. So
yes, that's not a problem. Brian,
it's been great talking to you. That was all fun.
It's truly fascinating, to be honest. I have genuinely learned quite a lot today, and I would love to invite you back on, in the future, and we can continue this.
And a coffee in Tel Aviv.
Yes,
please come. Listen, have a look now. Look up when Yom Ha'atzmaut. If you want to come for Yom Ha'atzmaut and Yom HaZikaron, you'll be blown away by it. Especially this year, it'll be horrific. But the party, and they've cancelled the flight. Normally, we have a fly past of the Air Force on Yom HaZikaron, but they've cancelled that, but because they're busy.
Yes, yeah. Brian, look, we leave you your plans. Honestly, pleasure having you on, and I'd love to have you back on in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brian.
You're welcome.
Bye. Bye. Superb. And do you know what?
Every day is a school day.
Every day is a school day. And honestly, I've really loved watching Brian's work over the years, and I mean the years, because Brian, hark back there to back the Tommy days, the Periscope days, and the EDL days, and things like that. And that's when I was sitting there on Twitter watching, and things like that. But the things, like the national pride is something.
See, I have to say, I didn't know this guy.
No. Well, you live, and you live on your phone, but only on your notifications. So yeah. No, but obviously I have, and I've watched Brian with Peter McAven on Hearts of Oak quite a few times, and always interesting. And I really do want to get out to Tel Aviv, and I think that the UK can learn a lot from this conversation alone.
Well, have a backbone. Yes.
Have a backbone and be bloody proud of your history. Be proud of yourself, because there's a reason why everybody wanted to sort of, assimilate and copy the way Britain does things, and it is because we had a proud history. We were good at doing things. We were strong people, and now what we've got is a very weak person's government beaten down. You speak out about what you're proud of, and you get beaten down. And I don't mean just that's a figure of speech, but you lose jobs, you lose homes, you lose relationships, you lose your life. And you do,
Yeah.
you know, and that's the cost of being proud of where you're from. And so it makes you question, doesn't it? Why are they so determined to make you hate your past?
Because if you've got no past, you've got no future.
Absolutely correct. And the reason why, obviously, one of the questions I wanted to ask Brian was regarding the boots on the ground. Brian resounding no, this shouldn't happen. Obviously, there is a massive difference when obviously you had the American Air Force and the Royal Air Force there taking out the drones that were coming from Iran. And they were taken out, and that's fine because you're helping in defense. But going in, you know, boots on the ground is, I think, a totally different situation.
I mean, the only way I'd accept that is if we have conscription and I've got a certain 7 million that I'd send over straight away.
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, someone else commented. They said,
No training.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Someone said on the poll, I won't highlight it. I'm going to bring the poll up on the screen now. But the poll is: do you support boots on the ground? Yes or no? And someone's comment, I clicked no, but yes, if it was a crusade. So let's have a look. So this is where we are. I got to say thank you very much, everyone, for turning out to vote on this. There's still, you know, quite a bit of time left. I wanted it for today, for this show. Should British troops be sent into Gaza? Please comment below why. We'll be discussing this on today's show. So you can see, you know, there's 96.5% of people saying no, and 3.5% of people need their head checked.
Yeah.
So, you know, it is overwhelming. And actually, hang on, because the one important thing there, because it might look good, but when you've got 50 people answering it, you know, it's a bit squiff. But, you know, 3,714 people, that is, you know, 8:05 this morning, which I think is actually 9:05, I can't remember. Because the clock's all wrong on this thing. Look, if you look, I don't know if you can see this down here on the bottom, the time is 15:38 when really it's 16:38.
Yeah.
But you know, it's clear. It's because it's clear. The problem is that the politicians are so out of touch with the people. Then whatever the people think, they're just going to do the opposite.
Is our page up yet?
Not yet. It is completed now.
So how can people donate?
They have to wait until the page is up. And you are right, because lots of people have. It's the worst possible time for the page to have gone down, to be honest, because the amount of people that have asked, you know, how do we become subscribers? I've seen a post and this and that. How do I do it? The link doesn't work. And I am sorry about it. It was the timing was all wrong. Basically, the website time ended at this point, so it weren't a choice. It was we had to do it. And that's what it is. But it will be back up soon. You will be able to donate. You're thinking about Tel Aviv, aren't you?
No. I was actually thinking that we had thousands on for Tommy, and it was down, and now we've got, and it's still down. That's the only reason.
Yeah, but we will put it out as soon as we can. But other than that, I think that's pretty much it now, isn't it?
I think it is.
There we go. So thanks all for watching. And if you could give it a share, that'd be great. This is obviously only live on
Ultraviolet Dreams. You've got some brilliant statistics. I've been sort of reading them. If you can send me where you've got those statistics from and who they relate to, is it Wales or is it the UK? England. Then I'd be much obliged.
Yeah, absolutely. So Stan is at Stan VO Wales. So you can find him on Twitter if you don't already have it. But other than that, thank you all for watching. Thank you to Brian of London for jumping on the show. You know, really fantastic guest. And honestly, really, I'm looking forward to having him back on.
Yeah.